All right, well, we are going to get started. Thank you again for joining us today for our webinar on turning dreams into degrees. Again, this is a Train the Trainer for facilitators on this curriculum, where we'll be providing some updates to the materials since we last did this about a year or so ago. My name is Jessica Petros. I'm an Associate Director of Education at John Byrne Advocates for Youth, and I'm joined by my colleague.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to have you all here this morning. My name is Megan Maddock. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a project manager with JBay. So it's great to be here with all of you.
So before we dive in, just a few logistics to go over. Over to the next slide. I want to let you know that this training is being recorded, and after the end of our training today, we're going to send everyone who registered for the training the meeting materials, including the webinar recording, as well as the PowerPoint slides. We're also going to put this information on our website, and I'll show you in just a few slides where we'll have the content along with all the other training materials for turning dreams into degrees. Also to note, if attendees need, they can either turn on or disable closed captioning. And then please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A at any time during our webinar. We have a smaller group today. We've got about an hour together. So as questions come up, put those in at any time, and we'll definitely have some dedicated time at the end for Q&A. And then best if you use the Q&A feature instead of the chat. So a little bit of background about who we are and how this training came to be before we talk about some of the updates. If you're not familiar, John Byrne Advocates for Youth, or often referred to as JBay, we're a nonprofit advocacy organization, and we do advocacy for both youth involved in the foster care system as well as youth experiencing homelessness. And we do this across a few different core areas, one of them being focused on education. So both locally here in LA County, where Megan and I are based, as well as statewide, we're engaged in various strategies and efforts to increase post-secondary attainment, including specifically for youth involved in the foster care system. And we do that through policy advocacy with various state legislative efforts, through technical assistance and training, as well as research. And so to give some background about how this training came to be for anyone who might be new to the material, is locally here in LA, we lead an initiative. We've been focusing on strategies to increase post-secondary attainment for foster youth in LA County. And one of the strategies that came out of the work that we've been doing with our partners was the importance and need of training our caregivers, given that they are with our youth every day and can play a really significant role in supporting them into post-secondary education and really creating that college-going culture. So we partnered here with LA County's foster and kinship care educators. A big shout out, I don't know if she's with us today, to Maria Granados here in LA County, who played a big role in helping us in developing this curriculum. And we developed this training specifically for caregivers. But it wasn't just developing the training. We had an external evaluator come in to evaluate the training. We heard really positive feedback. And then we partnered with our LA County Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Oh, good. We do have Maria there. Thank you, Maria. To make it a training requirement. So here in LA County, it's a requirement for resource families across all different settings. For our relative care resource families are required to either get education course 1 or 2 of this training. It's also a requirement for our FFAs and STRTP staff and families. So we know we got a lot of local LA County partners here on the call, but this training, given its success, has also been scaled statewide for our FKC partners throughout the state, which we're just thrilled to know that this valuable information is going out beyond just LA County. Of course, our materials are on our website and are open and available to anyone wanting to provide this training. But just want to give a little bit of background about how this training came about. And it's been around for a few years. And so, things change every year with laws and what's in statute. And so we wanted to do an update to folks who are providing this training about some of the updates to the curriculum due to recent changes in state legislation as well as federal. And while we were at it, of course, we made some ongoing updates and enhancements to the curriculum as well. Nothing major, but want to share some of those updates to the materials as well with you all today. Next slide. So we're going to go over a brief overview about the course materials and the timing, and then we'll really just focus our time on talking about new and updated content to both Education Course 1 and 2, and then some quick updates on Foster Parent College, and then again, we'll have time at the end for questions. All right, so before we start, this training has been around for a little while. I'm curious to just get a sense of how familiar you are with the training, if you've provided this training before or not. So I'm going to launch a poll that should pop up on your screen. If you can let us know how familiar you are with the curriculum, if you've provided this training before, if you feel very comfortable with it, mostly comfortable, and maybe you've only done it a few times, or you're new to this and just learning this content. Give folks a few more seconds to complete that. All right, I'm going to close the poll. And so it looks like most folks here today have done the training before. We do have some individuals who are new to the training content, and then quite a few returning trainers as well, which is great. Thank you. Let's see. Did that poll go away? Am I good? Okay. All right, we'll go to the next slide. All right. So turning dreams into degrees, again, this is a training for caregivers. There's two parts to the curriculum. There's Education Course 1, which is for caregivers serving youth in 6th grade through 10th grade. And then there's Education Course 2, which is for caregivers serving youth in 11th and 12th grade. And again, caregivers can mean resource parents, STRTP staff, we're using that term broadly. All of the materials can be found on the 2 links that we have here on the slide, and we'll put that into the chat as well. So what the materials include is, of course, today's webinar will be on there, but we have the PowerPoint slides for these 2 trainings, and they're available in English and Spanish. We're actually updating the Spanish curriculum right now, which we should have done by the end of May. So right now it'll just be the updated materials in English, but by the end of May, we'll also have all the updated materials in Spanish. But those PowerPoint slides, they've got everything you need to know. They have detailed trainer's notes. It's basically scripted. And then there's engagement opportunities throughout the training with detailed instructions within those notes of how to provide those activities either virtually or in person. There's also trainer's guides for the 2 courses, and that's a companion material to give you more information and tips on facilitating the training, more background information on the content, and then for things in the training where there's polls or quizzes or vignettes, there's information in the trainer's guide about suggested questions and background information you can use for that as well. Today we're just highlighting updates to the materials since it was released last year, but we do have full-length Train the Trainers for new trainers. So if you want to hear us do the training and listen to that entire training, you can go to that as well, and that's on there. And then there's also a link for supporting materials for caregivers as well. So there's companion materials for them that you can provide them when you're providing the training, and that's all on the website as well. Next slide. So when you provide them the supporting materials, what we've done since our training last time is we used to have a lot of different handouts that a companion to the training. So what we did is we updated our post-secondary educational planning guide, and I'll share more with you about that on the next slide. But all of that content has essentially been consolidated into one guide. That's a helpful resource, not just for caregivers, but really for adult supporters in general. And that guide, it's available in English and Spanish. and you can download it for free on our website. If you're interested in hard copies, you can order hard copies as well. You do have to pay for those with a third-party vendor, but we have information about that if you're interested. And there's the adult-facing version of the guide, but there's also youth-facing versions of the guide as well for students in high school in 9th through 11th grade as well as 12th grade. Those are also available in English and Spanish. And for anyone that really maybe liked those handouts from before, we still have them on there. They're just archived. So if you want to go and find them, you can see them. Moving forward, we won't continue to update those, but they're on there as well. So to talk a little bit more about this guide, it's again available for adults and for youth, but this is an overview about some of the content that's in there. It talks about the benefits of post-secondary education, an overview of the different post-secondary educational pathways, how adults can be education champions, gives a little bit of overview on foster youth education rights, tools for helping youth explore post-secondary education and career opportunities, um, good information on how to support our middle schoolers in that transition to high school and understanding the different high school completion options. And then there's grade specific checklists. And those can actually be downloaded individually and printed. So, if someone wants to just print out, what do I need to do for my 10th grader? That's all in there and they can print that out, as well as tips to help youth in that transition into higher ed about how to register for classes, how to succeed once in college, and then an overview of various resources to support youth in their education and post-secondary educational journey. There's also a lot of youth videos embedded within the guide. So if they want to hear directly from youth on various topics, they click on that link or scan the QR code as well. Next slide. In addition to that guide, we also have comprehensive financial aid resources available for caregivers, particularly, for those serving our high school seniors. There's the link there, and that includes our financial aid guide, which is kind of that deep dive into financial aid. We have our visual step-by-step guide. So if a caregiver wants to assist youth with their FAFSA, there's screenshots of every question in there with detailed instructions, as well as a how-to webinar for adults supporting youth in foster care, as well as unaccompanied homeless youth. So we have all those materials in there. And we also have an updated foster youth benefits chart. This is something we heard about as a need from a lot of our caregivers. It gives an overview of various benefits that foster youth are eligible for based on their time in foster care. There's been a lot of changes since we rolled out the training about a year and a half ago. So that chart has been updated to reflect good news, new additional benefits that foster youth are now eligible for here in California. And there's also a link to career guides that our partners with the LA Opportunity Youth Collaborative have developed for adults and youth. And then we provided a link now to the California Foster Youth Education Task Force has a great California Foster Youth Education law fact sheet. Previously, we linked to a little 2-pager on education rights, but we wanted to include this one because it's very comprehensive. And so if any caregivers really need information about broader K-12 educational laws, that's a great resource. And so we've included that as well. So here is an overview of the timing of Education Course 1. Now, again, this is in the trainer's guide. So you're going to go to your trainer's guide. It's going to give you an overview of the training. It's going to give you a breakdown on timing for each section. But just want to make sure folks know that both of these trainings are designed to be 3 hours in length, and that's accounting for activities, Q&A, and having a break. So again, this is in the trainer's guide material, but just want to show this to you as well so you can get a sense of what that breakdown looks like. There were a few spots where maybe we thought some slides were a little long or we made a few little tweaks, and so the timing may have shifted slightly, but generally it's the same as before. And again, here's an overview of the timing for Education Course 2. And as we'll talk about, this course has had more substantive changes, particularly given all the changes in the FAFSA that we're going to talk about. So the timing for different sections has shifted a little bit, as well as some new videos and things we've included. So just, encouraging facilitators to, familiarize yourself with this before providing the training. And with course 2, it's a little different. We give more of a menu of options of interactive opportunities that you can do with caregivers. So you can kind of choose your own adventure and pick which ones you think are best for your audience, because you know your audience best and which ones you think are going to, be most effective with them. Also giving, taking into consideration, their level of familiarity with technology and which kind of activities they might feel more comfortable with. So there's about 45 minutes of interactive activities embedded into course 2 that you can pick and choose which ones you want to do. So also to remind folks, because we now have facilitators doing this training, not just in LA County, but statewide, there are a few slides where we encourage you as the facilitator to update the content to reflect your local county and context. So for example, these 3 slides, and again, this is in the trainer's guide too, but right now for these slides, we have just general information about these programs. But for the independent living program, we encourage you to update that slide with contact information for your independent living program in your county. You'll have unique contact information for your ILP program, but also each program varies a little bit county to county and the services they provide or activities that they've got going on. So feel free to adjust that for your region. Similarly, for your county office of ed, your foster youth services coordinating program, content for that is in both courses. We again encourage you to update it with contact information for your county. Those programs too have, some unique nuances and programs and services that they're offering, so you can also include that. Now, for our LA County facilitators, we also create a additional handout if you're interested with some other local programs here in LA County, and that document has been updated as well, since contact information and things like that can change. So that's another resource for our LA County facilitators that's been updated. All right, so now I will turn it over to Megan to talk about some of this updated content that we keep talking about. And I will say one more thing just before I forget. As I mentioned, these slides are scripted, but we're going to go over the updates, but we encourage you to familiarize yourself with the content before you do it, so that you're not just reading a script to your attendees. I think you're going to lose them if they think you're just reading a script. So get familiar with the new content, look at it, feel free to put it in your own wording so that it flows more naturally for you as you're doing this. We have it scripted, so you have all the content you need, but then, you can make it feel like your own. All right, turn it over to you, Megan.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So like Jessica mentioned, we're going to dive into the content updates. And so the way that we're presenting our updates today is we're starting with the content that's the same for both Education Course 1 and Education Course 2. So like we mentioned, there are 2 versions of the training, one for younger children and then one for that's geared toward youth in their junior and senior year of high school. And there is some shared content between those 2 presentations, and we have made a little bit of changes to that shared content. So we're going to start with that. So one of the big changes that you'll see throughout the content is updates to the campus support programs, which is great news for our young people and exciting developments for youth who are attending college. First, we have the Next Up campus support programs at California community colleges. So in the previous versions of this training, you'll remember that Next Up was not available at all community colleges. It was only available at a subset. But now, through advocacy and funding, these programs are now available at all California community colleges, which is fantastic. They do have an eligibility requirement for that youth have to have been in care at 13 or later. They must also enroll in Next Step prior to the age of 26. But if they do that, they can stay in Next Step really forever. And there's no longer a unit requirement for Next Step. So throughout the the presentation, you'll see adjustments to the text and the slides where we had the older eligibility information about Next Step, where we had the older availability of the program across campuses. So that's been updated as part of the new content. And for those of you who are very familiar with Next Step, also know that some community colleges do have additional foster youth support programs on campus that serve youth who don't who are not Next Step eligible. So maybe they came into care when they were younger. The programs vary by name, but you'll typically hear them called Guardian Scholars. We also have the foster youth support programs at all CSUs and UCs. Again, this is a change to show that expansion of the availability of these programs. And these are programs like Guardian Scholars or Resilient Scholars, and students are eligible to participate in the programming through these support programs if they've been in foster care at any time, even if it was just one day. And I think an important change as well is that because of sustainable public state funding for these programs, they no longer have to, or these Guardian Scholar programs are no longer housed in EOP. So in the past, we kind of instructed students to be filling out that application so that they would be eligible for Guardian Scholars, but you no longer have to apply to EOP to be eligible, although participation in EOP is still a good thing for many of our young people to do. With those updates in mind, I'll share the content specifically that has changed in part one and part two. So again, this is content that has changed in both of the courses. So like Jessica mentioned, we are just did a basic refresh. So some of the data around like the tuition and scholarship and grants amount were a little bit older. So we updated those to current amounts. We won't actually show you the slides that where these updates were made, but just know if you're going through the training and you see something that looks a little bit different, it's probably because we've updated for the current year. Like I just mentioned on the last slide, we went through and tweaked the text and the slide where it referenced some community colleges have Next Step campuses to be all community colleges have Next Step programs, and to change that to show that these foster youth support programs are available across the systems. We also mentioned up top that we consolidated all of our handouts into the Foster Youth Post-Secondary Education Planning Guide. So where there are references to handouts, we updated that to refer to the guide instead. We also made some kind of just streamlined some of the content. This is particularly true in Education Course 1 that's focused on younger youth. Some of the information there wasn't so necessary for caregivers of that age range. So where there were text, where there was a lot of content, a lot of extra information, we did try to trim that down a little bit so that trainers would have an easier time going through that and that caregivers got the information that was most relevant to their age group. And finally, we updated some broken links and fixed some slide just technical issues. And if folks see any of those, you're welcome to reach out to me and we can get that fixed, but hopefully we caught everything. All right, and now I'm going to show you the actual content that was changed and we'll go through the slides. So the first content that was added, again, for part one and for part two, is that we pulled out the information on adult education, Job Corps, and military service into a separate slide. So previously, this information was kind of contained with the information on career technical education, and it was quite a lot of content for one slide. So we pulled that out so that caregivers would be able to see the information more clearly and that you as trainers would be able to facilitate it a little bit easier. So I'll go through that slide in a minute, and we'll also talk about a slide that we deleted, which is the California Career Zone slide. So this is the new slide that shows those adult education programs, Job Corps, and military service slide. So I'll go through the content of these slides so you understand what's in there. This content is not new. It was, like I mentioned, it was previously part of another slide. So there's no new information here. It's just been pulled out into a new slide. So for adult education, we talk about how this is also a pathway for career and technical programs that vary district to district, and that financial aid is available for students who are interested in following this pathway. They are similar to the career and technical education programs that are offered through community colleges, but units that are completed through these adult education course typically do not transfer for towards a college degree. And we talk about various options that are available through this, like phlebotomy, culinary arts, and construction. For Job Corps, that is a free residential education and job training program that's administered by the U.S. Department of Labor. And students who participate in Job Corps receive a basic living allowance alongside their career education. And that basic living allowance includes housing as well. So it offers a great opportunity to be hands-on with career skills. Again, a wide range of options for career and technical training like construction and water management, office administration, and it provides, again, those life skills in a supportive environment of Job Corps. About Job Corps, it does not require a minimum GPA or a high school diploma. However, it's important for caregivers to understand that because this is a federally administered program, there are eligibility requirements around age, income, and citizenship that they should be aware of. And finally, for military service, we do know that some youth will be interested in going down this path, and they can get access to housing resources and, again, living allowances with educational benefits as well. And it's important to remind caregivers that military is a full-time job that does include that education component, but it is a multi-year commitment for young people who are going down that path. So that's the again, not new content, just pulled out and put on a different slide. And then in terms of deleted content, and again, was deleted from both course 1 and course 2. And this is the California Career Zone activity and slide. And the reason we deleted this is because California Career Zone kind of changed their website a little bit, and it requires folks to pre-register to engage in the activities. And that's just too much of a challenge for you all facilitators to have caregivers do that in the midst of training. And so we kept the additional reality testing slide where you can talk about this website and can practice with some of the other kind of websites we have, like Salary Surfer and MIT Living Wage. So there's still that ability to talk about this content and practice it. We just removed this slide and activity in particular because of those changes to the website. You'll see when we talk about course 2 in particular is that the in course 2, we did replace this content with some youth videos and added a slide on growth mindset just to kind of fill the content that was left from the deletion of this slide. All right, so I'm going to get into the updated content, and this is just for part 2. So the changes that were made to part 1 were those shared content slides that we just went over. And now, like Jessica mentioned, more of the substantial changes have occurred in part 2 with the changes to the FAFSA. So just an overview of what we changed in part 2. So this looks like a lot, but it's actually, we took a lot of slides out. So there's a long list there. For part two, like I mentioned, we added some youth videos to help it be more engaging. We got some feedback from all of you that your caregivers really enjoy the youth videos, and part two didn't have any, so we wanted to add some of that content in. We added a reminder slide about growth mindset, especially working with teenagers, with older youth. It's good for caregivers to keep that in mind, especially as they're having these education and career conversations. And then we've updated the slides around financial aid, in particular, the FAFSA slides to reflect the changes that came out just this year with the FAFSA form. And then we have a number of deleted slides, and we'll kind of go through these in a few slides, but just to show you, we did delete some content from part two. So for the youth videos, we added a handful of videos, about 5 videos to part two, and they each show real young people talking about their experience with post-secondary education. And I think what we'll do is we'll show you one of them so you can get a feel for the videos and kind of what they look like. So bear with me as I get this queued up for all of you, and then we can watch it.
My name is Leanne Elizabeth Caldehan. I went to my first year of college of Cal State LA. I would now currently attend Cerritos Community College, later to transfer to Cal State Long Beach. College has really been an eye-opener for me. It kind of incorporated learning who I am, where I need to go in life, and it kind of taught me adulthood along the way, just life skills going through school.
Hi, my name is Edina Wade. The college that I attend was Cerritos College. My major was deaf communication. I just graduated in May, and I'm a transfer student, and I will be transferring to Cameron University. I'm the first graduate in my family, so that's a big impact in itself. Second, it taught me that when I put my mind to something, I could achieve it. And third, it made me want better for not only me, but for my kid. That's like the big impact it gave, like me just wanting and achieving better and know I could do better because I put my mind to something.
My name is Lucero Noyola. I started off at East Los Angeles Community College, transferred to USC, studied psychology and sociology, and then stayed there for my master's of social work. So my name is Carmen Noyola. I studied NGOs and social change for my undergrad and urban planning for my master's, and I got both degrees from USC. I think college was crucial for the type of life that I'm living today. It changed my life. It really did. I mean, having been incarcerated, early graduated from high school, and college was really that golden ticket that helped me move up in life and establish myself independently. College taught me how to write a professional email, how to act like a professional. So it was more than just a degree, it was life skills.
Great. So that gives you a sense of kind of what those videos look like, and we have several like them, again, sprinkled throughout the training, and it should be great for your caregivers to hear directly from those youth. Right. And so again, this is a change and a new slide for education part two, education course part two, but it is not new content if you are familiar with education course one. So this slide was part of the curriculum for education course one, and it talks about encouraging a growth mindset with your young person and helping caregivers to understand kind of how to be supportive and understand that mistakes and failure are not a reflection on the young person, but really an opportunity to reflect on what could be learned and opportunities for growth. So it goes through some examples of how caregivers can do that, like helping them to reframe perceptions of their academic abilities and reminding caregivers that young people in foster care have been through a lot, and sometimes their education has been disrupted through no fault of their own. And that patience, and especially with learning, is really key. Academics doesn't always come naturally to all young people, especially if they've had a lot of disruption in their life. So caregivers are encouraged to be patient with young people and encouraging the young person to seek out help and support like tutoring or other academic support resources if that's something that they need to be able to catch up. We also want caregivers to be reminded that youth have positive traits and strengths and to reflect those back as often as possible, even if maybe they're not doing so well in school academically. There are certainly other strengths that could be uplifted and that apply to a young person's academic ability. We also walk through some examples of how caregivers might understand how a young person is kind of stuck in a fixed mindset and not kind of feeling the benefits of that positive growth mindset, and ways that caregivers can respond. We have a few examples on this slide, and then we also have others in the post-secondary education planning guide. So it's a great thing to share with your caregivers, give them a concrete tool to be able to chat with their youth. All right, and I am going to turn it back over to Jessica to talk about some of our new financial aid available.
Great. So we're excited to share that since we last did this training, there's been an expansion in financial aid for foster youth in California that just went into effect last fall of 2023. So one of these is an expansion to the Student Success Completion Grant. This is already, a grant that's been in existence, but now foster youth that meet certain criteria can get additional money from this grant. So if there's a youth who was in foster care at least one day after their 13th birthday, and they're attending a California community college full time, so that's taking 12 units or more, they can now get that grant for $10,500 for the year. That's, usually broken into 2 semesters for $5,250 per semester. So again, that just went into effect last fall of 2023. It's very new. I don't think many caregivers or many youth know about this new funding. So we've included that in the training. It's also on the foster youth benefits chart. And as we'll show in the next slide, it really does start to add up when added with all the other types of financial aid that they're eligible for. In addition to that, there's also been an expansion to the middle class scholarship for foster youth. Now, this content is not in the training, but I do feel like it's helpful for you all to know for background and context. Unlike other forms of grants and financial aid that are out there that we include an overview of in the training, they're fixed amounts. The funding for the middle class scholarship varies, the award amount student to student. So it wasn't as easy to put on a chart and say, this is the amount that they can get, because it really is individualized per student. But just want you all to have this information as well, since this is new. The middle class scholarship, again, exists for students in general who are low to middle income if they're pursuing a bachelor's degree or a teaching credential at a UC, a CSU, or even those few community colleges that have bachelor level programs. And they can get this grant for up to 4 years, depending on when they start their educational journey, or 5 years if they're getting a teacher and credential. But the award amount for the middle class scholarship varies student to student and school by school. So the way that this funding works is each college sets up their cost of attendance, how much it costs to go to their school, which varies institution by institution. And the way that this funding works is they look at how much aid did the student receive from state, federal aid, grants, scholarships. They look at how much remaining unmet need the student has. Now, for any remaining unmet need that's greater than 7,898, the general student population only gets a portion, like about 30% of that remaining unmet need covered through this grant. But for foster youth now, if they've got remaining unmet need greater than that 7,898, 100% of that remaining gap is now funded through this middle class scholarship. And again, this just went out in fall 2023, the first semester, to eligible students here in California. So again, it's not in the training content, but just so you know, this is also a new funding opportunity. Information about this is included also in the financial aid guide. So it's there are other materials where the students can get this information. Next slide. So this is one of the slides where we update with that information. So this is the chart that's already has been in education course 2, where we let them know, like, look, there's a lot of financial aid available. Here's an overview of what it could look like, some common types of financial aid awards for full-time students. And now we have added to that list the Student Success Completion Grant, which is that $5,250 per semester. The slide notes really haven't changed for this because this is really meant to just have them see the big totals and how it adds up. But there is that new row on there that now updates the totals at the bottom when you're doing this slide to now show, about 24, almost 25,000 at the CSUs, 34,000 at the UCs, and 30,000 at the California community colleges. Next slide. All right, well, I'm going to have Megan talk to us about all these big FAFSA updates that just have gone into effect.
Yeah, so you've probably heard a lot about the FAFSA this year. There have been a lot of challenges with the rollout, but beyond that, there were some major changes to the FAFSA form that are designed to simplify the process for parents and for students who are completing the FAFSA. So we did update the content in course 2 to reflect those changes, and you'll see the major changes here on the slide. So first, students are going to need to create their FSA ID in advance of completing the FAFSA. So this is a big change for caregivers because in the past you used to be able to sit down, do it all at once, get the FAFSA done in one sitting. But with the changes that were made this year, caregivers and students will need to do this FSA ID process in advance of actually sitting down and completing the FAFSA. So that's really important for them to know, and we did include a slide, which you'll see in a minute, about creating that FSA ID in advance. The biggest change, and a very helpful change, is that in most cases, students will no longer need to enter their income information manually. So in the past, there were many questions about many financial related questions, and now there are a lot fewer because with the new FAFSA form, instead of putting in, that information manually, students have to consent to allow an information transfer from the IRS to the FAFSA to receive that financial information. So it's a lot simpler. They do, however, need to consent, otherwise they will not be able to complete the FAFSA. So we included information on that change as well. Students can now also enter more colleges than previous FAFSA applications. So in the past, I believe it was just 10 colleges, and now it's 20. So that's much expanded. And then finally, there have been some changes, significant changes to the questions around independent student status and eligibility for foster youth in terms of which of those questions apply to foster youth. So we added a new slide to go over what those new questions look like to make sure caregivers and their students know which options to select so that they're identified as a foster youth in the FAFSA and are eligible for all their benefits. So this is the first of the new slide around the FAFSA, and it talks about creating the FSA ID. There is some animation built into this slide that won't be shown on this update, but each of these boxes kind of comes up individually as you're talking through it. So we talk about how this is required to complete the FAFSA and how there's this new process and that this needs to be done at least a few days in advance of actually sitting down and completing the FAFSA form. In order to complete or to apply for this FAFSA FSA ID, you'll need a few things. So the student will need their social security number and their name, exactly how it appears on their social security card. So it's good to have that document in front of you when you're filling out the FSA ID application so that if there's issues with a hyphen or anything like that, or a spelling of a name, that's captured so that the FSA ID is approved. We talk about the students needing an email address, preferably one that's not attached to high school and one that is able to be checked frequently so they can get notification once their FSA ID is approved and continue to receive kind of important information about applications and financial aid to that email address without having to worry about being able to access it in the future. And with the FSA ID, we do recommend that students include a cell phone number as well as part of this process. It's not required, but if you do end up losing your password, that's a way to more easily reset it. So it's a good thing to include when applying for this FSA ID. And so once the application is submitted for the FSA ID, you will get an email, or the student will get an email in a few days once it's processed and approved. And at that point, you're able to start the FAFSA application. So with the changes to the FAFSA, we updated this slide more significantly. This is what to bring when you're sitting down to actually do your financial aid application. We talk about the FSA ID, and again, a reminder that that needs to be done in advance. And then for the CADA, the California DREAM Act application, there is no FSA ID required. However, students it's recommended that they come prepared with their statewide student identifier number or their individual taxpayer identification number. Both of those are not required, but they are recommended, particularly the statewide student identifier number when filling out the CADA application. And again, we're repeating the kind of the same content around the email address. We want to make sure that this is an email address that is accessible to young people, that it won't expire like a high school email address, and it's something that they'll be able to check and receive and get the financial aid information once they've submitted the FAFSA. And like we talked about up top here, they now can provide up to 20 colleges within the FAFSA application to get those notifications sent to those colleges. So students now can have a list ready of up to 20 colleges. And I talked about how some of the financial aid or the financial information in the FAFSA form has been greatly simplified. Students will still need to bring some information about their current assets, like the total amount in their checking and savings account. It will also be helpful to know if they are receiving any benefits like CalFresh, Medi-Cal, CalWorks, as these benefits will allow exemption from reporting some of those assets. And there'll be a list there is a list in the new FAFSA that allows students to check off which of those benefits that they are receiving. And just a reminder, Jessica talked about this up top with our financial aid guide. We also have a visual guide to the new FAFSA and new CADA, and it walks you through step by step so that you're able to see the different screens that a student and caregiver will be able um, to see when they're completing the FAFSA and the CADA. And so that's a helpful resource to share with your caregivers if they have a lot of questions about this new process. And so I mentioned that there have been some changes to the independent student status component of the FAFSA. And so as a reminder, this piece is pretty important for foster youth. So if they answer yes to any of these questions, if they qualify for independent student status, it means that they do not have to report any information about their parents on the application, including their parents' financial information. They'll only need to provide that financial information about themselves. So it is key that foster youth be able to understand these questions and be able to select them so that they do qualify for that independent status. And these questions, again, have changed in the new FAFSA. And so when you get to this screen on the FAFSA, there's kind of a list of options. And within those list of options, these are the three most relevant questions to foster youth. So I'll just read them to make sure that we know them. So at any time since the student turned 13, they were in foster care, or at any time since the student turned 13, they were a ward of the court. So for FAFSA, we don't have any guidance on what the difference is between the two of these. So we recommend that foster youth select both that they were in foster care at any time since they turned 13, and they were a ward of the court. And then the last question that would help to determine independent student status is the student is or was in a legal guardianship with someone other than their parent or step-parent as determined by a court in their state of residence. So these, again, are the important questions caregivers need to look out for on the FAFSA so that they're able to guide their youth with completing it and for gaining that independent student status. Right. So that was the new content that we provided in course 2. And we also talked about how we took a lot of content out of course 2. So I'll go through and just briefly show you the slides that were deleted and talk a little bit about kind of why we decided to take those out. As a reminder, we did put videos in to be able to make up for this content. So the timing of the course hasn't changed, even though there are some deleted slides. So we deleted these two slides kind of around that financial aid section, paying for college section. So there was 3 steps to maximizing aid, kind of setting folks up for understanding how to apply for FAFSA. And we just incorporated the important message of this slide, which is that folks need about an hour to help their young person fill out the FAFSA into the content about what to bring for financial aid so that caregivers take away that important point that it is something they need to sit down and do with their young person and that it takes about an hour. This slide also did not make a lot of sense with the new FSAID process, so that's why we took this one out. We also took the slide out about special immigrant juvenile status and young people who are undocumented, and there's still the slide in there that shows which financial aid application to complete if a young person is undocumented. This slide had a lot more information about what SIGIS means and kind of guidance for caregivers that we thought may have been a little bit too much for caregivers. This content, however, we did embed it in the trainer's guide. So if there is information, there are questions from your caregivers about SIGIS, or they have a youth who's undocumented and you want a little bit more information about how to guide them, the content of this slide is now in the trainer's guide for course 2. So it didn't go away. It's just not part of the slide package in this new version. All right, and these 3 slides were also deleted from course 2. So 2 of these slides, the special consideration slide, so that is replaced by that independent student status slide that we just went over. The content on the slide is no longer relevant. It's referring to the old FAFSA, so we took that one out. We also took the slide out that's called after the FAFSA checklist. We took this out because it's no longer a separate resource that JBay publishes. It's part of our financial aid guide. So we talk a lot about the financial aid guide as part of this section in education course 2. So that's, again, no longer a resource that our caregivers have access to. And then we took this slide out about financial aid helps, mostly just to trim content. This particular section of education course 2, as you probably are familiar with, is pretty dense. There's a lot of technical information about applying to college, applying to financial aid, and we just felt that we wanted to give you all a little bit of break and caregivers a little bit of a break to be able to reflect on that information, and that this information was probably not the most necessary part of that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to finish up with Foster Parent College.
Thanks, Megan. So just a quick update for folks about Foster Parent College, which provides, free training for caregivers here in California. This course is available on their website as well. If we go to the next slide, it just has a slightly different name. It's called Preparing Teens for Post-Secondary Education. So just wanted to make sure you all know that part 1, which is essentially our education course 1, is on their website. It is now available in English and Spanish. And part 2 will soon be on their website sometime, we're hoping this year. It's already been developed. We're just working with them to get it up on their website as well. But that is going to be available in English and then ultimately in Spanish. But that part will take a little bit longer to get developed. So with that, we do have a few moments for questions. I haven't seen many come through the chat. I did see one question about if we're going to include information about free tuition at public four-year colleges. So as we showed before, we have this slide that provides an overview about the types of financial aid that youth are eligible for. And actually on there, when we add up the totals, it does include the estimated cost of tuition at the CSUs and UCs. Since most of our foster youth are also low income, they generally do qualify for tuition being covered at the CSUs and UCs. So it is included in part of that total in that sense. And that information is also in the financial aid guide as well. There's not a particular, I don't think we dive too deep into it in the training, but it's part of that overview that they can qualify for all that type of financial aid. And we've got, I guess, one more minute. If there's any other burning questions, feel free to put it in the chat. And we can take a moment to respond to that. But if not, that's great. You all got this content. And if you have any other questions, you can reach out to us as well. We can put our email addresses into the chat. And a question about, did I miss CalKids information? What are your thoughts on this? There is not information about CalKids in the training. CalKids is a college savings account program here in California. If someone's a newborn, they can get $100 in their account if they're born sometime after July of last year. And there's also a college savings component for an enhanced deposit. If someone is low income, foster, or homeless, they can get $500 in their account, but only if they are in the first grade. So it's a very narrow criteria right now for foster youth to be able to get that additional $500. We are actually working on a bill, AB 2508, that we're sponsoring to try and expand eligibility for CalKids so that it would apply to youth in foster care at any time in 1st through 12th grade. So we are hoping to do that. And if we are successful in getting that bill passed, I think that would be definitely an enhancement that we would want to for sure include in the next version of this training. Right now, it's just a very narrow eligibility criteria just for those first graders. A great question. And again, this training is going to be recorded, and we will follow up with an email to everyone probably sometime on Monday with the meeting recording and PowerPoint slides, so you have all that information as well. And it'll also be on our website. And I'll put my email into the chat. If anyone has any other questions, again, feel free to reach out to us. And we'll put Megan's in there too. All right, I think we are out of time, but I really appreciate everyone's time today joining the training. Our contact information is also on the slide as well. And again, all these materials will be on our website. So if there's anything else, feel free to reach out, and thank you so much.